"Uncle, don't drink. They put something in your glass," screamed the beggar girl as he dined. Michael Thompson nearly choked on his first sip of champagne when he heard the desperate cry. The glass trembled in his hands as his blue eyes locked onto the dirty girl who had appeared out of nowhere in the elegant restaurant. "Uncle, don't drink that," the girl, about 12 years old, shouted again, her messy hair swaying as she urgently pointed at the glass. "I saw the waiter put something in your drink when you went to the bathroom." Michael froze. The girl was clearly homeless, her torn clothes brutally contrasting with the restaurant's sophisticated atmosphere. Other patrons began turning their heads, whispering and pointing. "How did you get in here?" was all Michael managed to ask, still holding the glass in the air. "That doesn't matter now," the girl insisted, stepping closer. "The tall waiter with the mustache waited until you left and poured white powder into your drink. I saw it all from the window." Michael's heart raced. He looked around for the waiter who had served his table, but the man had vanished. The restaurant's security was already approaching with firm steps. "Mr. Thompson, we deeply regret this inconvenience," the manager said, arriving quickly. "We'll remove this person immediately." "No," Michael raised his hand, surprised by his own reaction. "First, I want to understand what she's saying." The girl was breathing heavily, her dark eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. There was something in that gaze that struck Michael deeply, a familiarity he couldn't explain. "What's your name?" he asked, setting the glass down without drinking. "Emily," she replied, wiping her nose with the back of her dirty hand. "Emily Parker. And you need to believe me, that man isn't a real waiter." The restaurant manager stepped closer, clearly embarrassed by the situation. "Mr. Thompson, all our staff undergo rigorous screening. This child is obviously confused or trying some kind of scam." Michael studied Emily's face carefully. There was a desperate sincerity in her eyes that made him hesitate. As a successful businessman, he had learned to read people, and something inside him told him the girl was speaking the truth. "Where's the waiter who served me?" Michael asked the manager. Well, the manager stammered. "I believe he went on break." "A very convenient break," Emily muttered, crossing her thin arms. Michael felt a chill. He had been involved in tense negotiations lately, especially with his partner Richard Cooper, who was unhappy with certain company decisions. Could someone actually want to harm him? "Show me where you saw this happen," Michael asked Emily. The girl led him to the restaurant's side window. Outside, there was a small gap between buildings where she had clearly taken shelter. From there, she had a direct view of Michael's table. "I always stay here when it's cold," Emily explained. "People sometimes throw food away and I can watch the restaurant. When I saw that man messing with your drink, I knew I had to warn you." "Why did you care to warn me?" Michael asked, genuinely curious. Emily looked down. "My grandma always said we have to protect people even when no one protects us." Those words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He thought of his own childhood, when his mother used to say similar things before everything changed. The manager approached again, this time with 2 security guards. "Mr. Thompson, we really need to resolve this situation. The girl is disturbing our other guests." Michael looked around and saw several elegant customers watching them with discomfort and disapproval. Some women whispered behind their glasses, clearly bothered by Emily's presence. "She saved my life," Michael said firmly, "and I won't let anyone treat her poorly for it." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. At that moment, a man in a dark suit hurried toward the restaurant entrance. It was Richard Cooper, Michael's business partner, his face etched with worry. "Michael, thank God you're all right," Richard exclaimed. "I got an anonymous call saying something terrible might happen to you here." Michael felt his suspicion grow. "An anonymous call? From who?" "I don't know." The voice was distorted, Richard replied, glancing nervously at Emily. "They said someone wanted to harm you during dinner." Emily whispered something only Michael could hear. "He's lying. His eyes won't meet yours." Michael studied Richard more closely. His partner did seem overly nervous, avoiding direct eye contact. They had met earlier that week to discuss selling a significant part of the company, and Richard had been far from happy with Michael's decision to refuse the offer. "Richard, where were you an hour ago?" Michael asked calmly. "Working at the office like always," Richard answered quickly. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Michael said, but his mind was racing. If Richard was involved in this, Emily had truly saved his life. The restaurant manager approached again, this time looking even more tense. "Mr. Thompson, I have bad news. The employee who served you is no longer in the building. He left his uniform in the locker room and went out the back." A heavy silence fell between them. Michael looked at Emily, who watched him with a mix of fear and hope in her eyes. "I'm taking this girl with me," Michael announced. "She needs medical care and a decent meal." "Michael, you can't be serious," Richard protested. "You don't even know this girl. She could be part of some elaborate scam." "The only scam here," Michael said, staring hard at Richard, "was stopped by her." Emily timidly tugged at Michael's jacket sleeve. "Sir, you don't have to worry about me. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." "What's your full name?" Michael asked, ignoring Richard's protests. "Emily Parker Wilson," she replied. "I'm 12 and I don't have any family." Something stirred in Michael's chest. The name Wilson reminded him of something, but the memory was hazy, as if from long ago. "Where were you born, Emily?" "Right here in New York City at Mercy General Hospital," she said. "My grandma always kept my birth certificate in a little metal box. She said it was important to have documents." "And where is your grandma now?" Emily lowered her head. She passed away 3 months ago. Since then, I've been living on the streets." A deep ache filled Michael's chest. This girl had lost the only person she had in the world, and still risked herself to save him. "Richard, I'll need some time to think about our business," Michael said, still watching Emily. "For now, my priority is helping the person who helped me." "You're making a mistake, Michael," Richard muttered. "This whole situation could damage our reputation." "Our reputation?" Michael turned to face his partner. "Or are you worried about something else?" Richard paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm sure you don't," Michael replied dryly. Emily watched the tension between the two men carefully. She had learned on the streets to recognize signs of danger, and something about that, Richard, made her extremely uneasy. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, "that man is angry because the plan didn't work." Michael bent down to Emily's height. "What plan, sweetheart?" "I don't know exactly, but when people get this mad, it's because they wanted something bad to happen and it didn't." The simplicity of Emily's logic was devastating. Michael straightened up and faced Richard again. "I think we should talk tomorrow, Richard, in private." "As you wish," Richard said coldly. "But think carefully about the consequences of your decisions, Michael, both in business and other areas." The veiled threat didn't go unnoticed. Michael felt a mix of anger and disappointment. Richard had been his partner for over 5 years, and now it was clear he had betrayed his trust. After Richard left, Michael turned to Emily. "Are you hungry?" The girl's eyes lit up. "I'm always hungry, sir." Michael called the waiter on duty and ordered the best dish on the menu for Emily. As they waited, he observed how she carried herself in the elegant setting. Despite the dirt and torn clothes, Emily had naturally polite manners, as if she had been raised with good values. "Your grandmother taught you good manners," Michael remarked. "Grandma Grace used to say poverty was no excuse for rudeness," Emily replied, trying to smooth her hair with her hands. "She taught me to read, write, and always say thank you and please." "Grace Wilson?" Michael asked, feeling a chill. "Yes, sir. Did you know my grandma?" Michael fell silent for a long moment. The name Grace Wilson had stirred a memory buried for over 20 years. Grace had been his family's housekeeper when he was a teenager, a kind and wise woman who had practically been a second mother to him after his own mother's early passing. "Emily," he said carefully, "did your grandmother work as a housekeeper when you were little?" "She did. She took care of a wealthy family on the Upper East Side. She always talked about a boy she helped raise, a blonde boy with blue eyes who loved math and dreamed of having his own company. Michael felt the world spin around him. She talked about me? Emily studied him closely. Are you the Michael Grandma always mentioned? The boy she helped raise? That's me, Michael whispered, his voice thick. Grace practically raised me from 12 to 18. When I left for college, I promised I'd always take care of her, but what? Emily asked gently. But I got lost in business, in success, in money. I lost touch with all the people who truly mattered in my life. Emily reached out her small, dirty hand and touched Michael's. Grandma always said you were a good boy. She never got angry that you lost touch. She said important people sometimes need to follow their own paths. Michael felt tears burning his eyes. Did she talk about you too? She did. She said I was the light of her life, but if anything ever happened to her, I couldn't give up, that I had to be strong and find my own way. And you did, Michael said with admiration. You found me. Just then, the food arrived. Emily looked at the meal as if it were treasure. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the utensils. Eat as much as you'd like, Michael said gently, and then we'll sort out your situation. As Emily ate, Michael thought about how his life had completely changed in a matter of minutes. That morning, he had just been a successful businessman, worried about profits and losses. Now he had discovered that his life was in danger, that his partner had likely betrayed his trust, and that the granddaughter of the woman who had raised him was living on the streets. Emily, he said after she finished eating, would you like to come home with me tonight? I have a guest room where you can sleep and take a hot shower. Emily hesitated. Are you sure, sir? I don't want to cause any trouble. You already saved me from big trouble, Michael replied. Now it's my turn to help you. The drive to Michael's apartment was quiet. Emily watched the city lights through the car window, while Michael thought about all the implications of the night. He would need to investigate Richard discreetly, understand exactly what had happened at the restaurant, and most importantly, figure out how he could help Emily. When they arrived at the luxurious apartment in Greenwich Village, Emily was stunned. Wow, it's really beautiful here. You can stay as long as you need, Michael said. Tomorrow, we'll talk about your future. That night, after Emily had showered and slept in clean, borrowed clothes, Michael stayed awake thinking. Grace had been like a mother to him, and now her granddaughter was under his protection. It couldn't be a coincidence. The next morning, Michael woke early and found Emily already up, gazing out the apartment window. Good morning, he said. Did you sleep well? It was the best night's sleep I've had in months, she replied with a shy smile. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You can just call me Michael, he said, and I have a proposal for you. Emily turned to him with full attention. I'd like you to live here with me, Michael said. Not as a favor, but as family. Grace was like a second mother to me, which makes you something like a younger sister. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Michael, are you sure? I'm sure it's what Grace would have wanted, he replied, and I'm sure it's what I want. Emily rushed to hug him, and Michael felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about business or money, but about family and real human connections. But the happiness didn't last long. Michael's phone rang, and it was his lawyer with alarming news. Michael, I need to see you urgently, Mr. Johnson said. Richard has filed a lawsuit questioning your ability to make business decisions. He's claiming you're under outside influence and can no longer run the company. Michael felt his blood run cold. Can he do that? He can try. And worse, he's already called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. He's spreading rumors that you've had some kind of mental breakdown. What kind of rumors? That you were seen in a restaurant hallucinating, talking to a street kid, making scenes in public. He's painting a very concerning picture of your mental stability. Michael looked at Emily, who was watching the conversation with growing worry. She clearly understood her presence was causing trouble for him. Mr. Johnson, Richard is behind everything that happened yesterday. The girl who helped me is real, the threat was real, and he was involved. Michael, I believe you, but you need proof. The board will only listen to concrete facts. After hanging up, Michael explained the situation to Emily. "I should leave," she said sadly. "I don't want to cause problems for you." "Absolutely not," Michael said firmly. "You're not going anywhere. We'll fight this together." "But how?" Emily asked. "Who's going to believe a street kid over an important businessman?" Michael thought for a moment. "You said you saw everything from the window. Are you absolutely certain you'd recognize the man who put something in my drink?" "I'm sure," Emily replied. "He had a small scar on his forehead and a strange way of walking. Let's go to the restaurant. If we can get the security footage, we can prove you were telling the truth." At the restaurant, however, they hit their first obstacle. The manager informed them there had been a technical issue with the security cameras the night before, and all recordings from that time were lost. "How convenient," Michael murmured. Emily tugged his sleeve. "Michael, isn't that the same man who was talking to the manager yesterday?" Michael looked where Emily pointed and saw a man in a suit whispering with the manager at the back of the restaurant. There was something familiar about him. "Let's get closer quietly," Michael whispered. They managed to get near enough to catch part of the conversation. "The situation is under control. The cameras are taken care of. The kid won't be a problem." The man in the suit turned, and Michael recognized him immediately. It was Peter, Richard's personal assistant for over 2 years. Everything started to make sense. Richard had planned everything meticulously, using Peter to coordinate the attack at the restaurant and now to erase the evidence. "We need to get out of here," Michael whispered to Emily. But it was too late. Peter had seen them and was approaching with a fake smile. "Mr. Thompson, what a surprise to see you here again." "Peter," Michael replied coldly. "Interesting you're here too." "Just tying up some loose ends," Peter said, glancing uncomfortably at Emily. "What kind of loose ends?" Michael pressed. "Nothing you need to worry about," Peter deflected. "By the way, Mr. Cooper is expecting you at the office. The board meeting was moved up." Michael felt the trap closing. If he went to the office now, he'd be walking straight into an ambush. But if he didn't, Richard would use it as further proof of his mental instability. "Emily," he whispered, "I need you to do something very important for me." "Anything," she answered. "I want you to go home and stay there until I come back. And if I'm not back by tonight, call this number." He scribbled a number on a napkin. "It's my lawyer. Tell him everything." "I don't want to leave you alone," Emily protested. "I need to face this, and you'll be safer at home." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Reluctantly, Emily agreed. Michael put her in a taxi and headed to the office, knowing he was walking into a battle that could cost him everything he'd built. At the company office, Michael found a scene that confirmed his worst fears. Richard was in the boardroom with 3 directors, all wearing grim expressions. "Michael," Richard said with false concern, "so glad you made it. We've all been very worried about you." "Worried about what, exactly?" Michael asked, keeping his voice steady. "Your erratic behavior over the last 24 hours, answered Dr. Williams, the senior board member. "Richard told us about the incident at the restaurant." "And what version of the incident did he share?" Michael asked. "That you had some kind of breakdown, talking to yourself, seeing people who weren't there," Dr. Williams said regretfully, "and that you then brought a homeless girl to your house, claiming she was your sister." Michael took a deep breath. "And you believed that version without hearing my side?" "That's why we're here," said Dr. Anderson, another board member, "to hear your version." Michael told the whole truth about the poisoning attempt, about Emily being Grandma Grace's granddaughter, about the suspicions regarding Richard. When he finished, the silence in the room was deafening. "Michael," said Richard with a tone of false compassion, "you're clearly going through a tough time. Maybe it's best if you take a leave, seek professional help." "The only professional help I need," Michael replied, "is a private investigator to look into your activities, Richard." "That's a very serious accusation," said Dr. Williams. "Do you have any proof?" "I'm working on it," Michael answered. "In the meantime," Richard interjected, I propose that Michael step aside from the executive leadership temporarily until this situation is cleared up. Two of the three board members seemed inclined to agree with Richard. Michael realized he was losing the battle. I'd like to request 48 hours to present evidence, he said. 24 hours, Richard countered. We can't leave the company in limbo for too long. The board agreed. Michael had one day to prove his innocence and expose Richard, or he would lose everything. When he got home, he found Emily waiting anxiously. How did it go? She asked. I have 24 hours to prove Richard is lying, Michael replied, disheartened. Then let's prove it, Emily said with determination. How, Emily? We have no evidence, no witnesses, nothing. Emily thought for a moment. Michael, you said Peter was talking to the restaurant manager today. What if we could get them to confess? How? On the streets, you learn that sometimes people tell the truth when they think no one's listening. Michael looked at Emily with growing admiration. What are you suggesting? That we follow them, find out where they meet, and record them talking? Emily, that could be dangerous. More dangerous than letting Richard destroy your life? Michael had no answer for that. The 12-year-old girl was showing more courage and determination than he was. All right, he said, but we do it my way, carefully. They spent the rest of the afternoon tracking Peter's movements. Through some contacts, Michael learned that Peter frequented a bar in the West Side every Thursday after work. By 7 that evening, they were seated at a discreet table in the same bar, watching Peter drink alone at the counter. Now we wait, Michael whispered. They didn't have to wait long. At 8:15, Richard arrived at the bar and joined Peter. The two moved to a table in the back, clearly seeking privacy. Can you hear anything? Michael asked Emily. A little, she replied. They're talking about money and how you're finally going to pay for what you did. Michael discreetly turned on his phone's recorder and tried to move closer. Couldn't have gone better, Richard was saying. With that street kid in the picture, the board is convinced he's lost his mind. What if he finds proof? Peter asked nervously. What proof? Richard laughed. The waiter we hired is already out of the country. The footage was erased, and there's no physical evidence of anything. But what if the girl talks? Who's going to believe a street kid over two respected businessmen? Richard said dismissively. Michael felt anger boiling in his veins. The recorder was capturing everything. Besides, Richard continued, once I take full control of the company, I'm selling everything to the Americans. We'll be millionaires, Peter. And Michael? Michael will learn that crossing me has consequences. First the company, then his reputation, then everything else he cares about. At that moment, Emily accidentally knocked over her glass of water. The noise made Richard and Peter look in their direction. Damn, muttered Michael. We've been caught. Richard stood up immediately and started walking toward them. Michael grabbed Emily's hand and quickly headed for the exit. Run! He shouted. They bolted out of the bar, with Richard and Peter in pursuit. Michael managed to reach his car and start the engine before the two could catch up. Did you get everything recorded? Emily asked breathlessly. I did, Michael replied, accelerating. We have our proof. But when they got home, they found the battle was far from over. The apartment had been broken into and completely ransacked. They were looking for something, Emily said, staring at the mess. Michael checked his personal safe. Several important documents were missing, including original company contracts and personal papers. Richard is trying to erase any evidence that could hurt him, Michael concluded. The phone rang. It was Mr. Johnson, the lawyer. Michael, I have bad news. Richard got a court order preventing you from accessing any company accounts or making administrative decisions. Starting tomorrow, he's the interim CEO. He can't do that. He can, at least temporarily. And there's more. He filed a lawsuit claiming you're under the influence of a third party and that your judgment is impaired. What third party? A minor you allegedly kidnapped off the streets. Michael looked at Emily, who had heard everything. The girl's eyes filled with tears. He's saying I'm a criminal, she asked, her voice trembling. He's using you to destroy me, Michael said angrily. But we won't let him. That night, Michael barely slept. In the morning, he had a board meeting to present his evidence, but Richard had completely turned the tables. When they woke up, they faced an even bigger surprise. Emily was gone. Michael found a note on the kitchen table. "Michael, I can't let my presence ruin your life. You've been so kind to me, but now I have to leave so I don't cause more trouble. Thank you for everything. Emily." Michael's heart shattered. In 2 days, he'd found a family, and now he was losing it again. He desperately searched for Emily, scouring every place a street kid might hide. He asked homeless people, checked shelters, looked in parks and under bridges. Meanwhile, Richard was consolidating his power at the company. The board meeting happened without Michael, who was officially removed from all executive roles. When Michael finally returned home that night, exhausted and empty-handed, he found Mr. Johnson waiting with more devastating news. Richard sold 40% of the company's shares to an American group, the lawyer said. Technically, he had board authorization to do so in an emergency. What emergency? Your alleged mental incapacity. He argued the company needed immediate capital to stay stable during the leadership crisis. Michael collapsed onto the couch, defeated. In less than 48 hours, he'd lost his company and the girl who had become like a sister to him. "Is there anything we can do?" he asked hoarsely. "The recording you made might help, but Richard has already presented a different version of events. He claims you ran into each other at the bar and the conversation was taken out of context." "And who's going to believe me over him?" "That's the problem," Mr. Johnson said sadly. "Richard has built a very convincing narrative about your instability." That night, Michael walked the streets searching for Emily. He needed to find her not just to get his company back, but because she had become the most important person in his life. At 2 in the morning, he found her sleeping on a park bench in the city center, wrapped in an old coat and shivering from the cold. "Emily," he called softly. She woke up startled, but calmed down when she saw it was him. "Michael," she exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms. "I missed you so much." "Why did you run away?" he asked, holding her tight. "Because I heard you talking to the lawyer. I was causing problems for you. I thought if I left, Richard would stop using my presence against you." "Emily, you're not causing problems. Richard is the one causing problems, and we'll solve this together." "But how? He won. He got your company." Michael cupped Emily's face in his hands. "He may have won a battle, but he hasn't won the war. And you know why?" "Why?" "Because I have something he'll never have. A real family. You." Emily began to cry. "But what about your company? All your hard work? Companies can be rebuilt. But family, a real family, is one of a kind. And I'm not losing you again." They went home together, and Michael made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, he called a famous investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. "Samantha Miller," he said on the phone, "I have a story that might interest you about manipulation, betrayal, and a brave girl who saved my life." Samantha agreed to meet them that afternoon. When Michael told the whole story and played the recording, the journalist's eyes lit up. "This is exactly the kind of story I love to investigate," she said. "A greedy businessman trying to destroy his partner and getting exposed by a 12-year-old girl." "Do you believe our version?" Emily asked timidly. "Sweetheart," Samantha replied with a smile, "I have 30 years of experience reading people. You're telling the truth." Samantha began her investigation immediately. Within 3 days, she uncovered a series of financial irregularities in the company, including suspicious transfers to offshore accounts linked to Richard. She also found the waiter who had tried to poison Michael. The man was hiding in a small town, but agreed to confess in exchange for protection. Samantha's article was published on a Friday and caused a massive scandal. The headline read, "Street Girl Saves Businessman and Uncovers $1 Million Scam." The story included all the evidence, the recording, the fake waiter's testimony, incriminating financial documents, and most importantly, the moving account of how Emily had saved Michael. The impact was immediate. The company's board called an emergency meeting and stripped Richard of all his positions. The police opened investigations into attempted poisoning and financial fraud, but Richard's revenge wasn't over. The following Tuesday, Michael received a threatening call. "You think you've won?" Richard said, his voice full of hate. "I'll destroy your life in other ways, and I'll start with the girl." Michael's blood ran cold. If you lay a finger on her, or what? Richard laughed. You'll call the police? They're too busy investigating false accusations against me to care about some street girl. The call ended, and Michael panicked. Emily was at the school he had enrolled her in. But what if Richard tried something there? He rushed to the school and found Emily excitedly talking to a teacher about a science project. "Michael," she shouted when she saw him. "Look, Mrs. Jessica said my project on urban plants can be in the science fair." Seeing Emily happy and settled in school warmed Michael Thompson's heart, but he was still worried about Richard's threats. "Emily, I need to talk to you about something important," he said. They sat on a bench in the schoolyard, and Michael explained Richard's threat. "He can't do anything to me," Emily said with a confidence that surprised Michael. "I survived 3 months on the streets alone. I won't let a bad man intimidate me now that I have a real family. Even so, let's be careful. For the next few days, you'll always have someone with you." In the following days, Michael discreetly hired security for Emily, but his concerns proved justified when they discovered strangers had been seen lurking around the school. A week later, when Michael went to pick Emily up from school, she wasn't there. She left with a man who identified himself as her uncle, the teacher Jessica informed him, looking worried. He had all the necessary documents. Michael felt his world crumble. Richard had kidnapped Emily. His phone rang immediately. "If you want to see the girl again," Richard's distorted voice said, "you'll sign over all your shares in the company. You have 2 hours to go to the notary and sign the deed alone." "Where is she?" Michael shouted. "Somewhere safe for now." 2 hours, Michael. And if you involve the police, she disappears forever." Michael rushed home, desperate. How had Richard gotten fake documents? How had he gotten past the school's security? He called Mr. Johnson and told him what had happened. "Michael, you can't do this," the lawyer said. "If you sign those papers, Richard gets everything, and he still might not return Emily." "And if I don't sign, he could hurt her," Michael replied. "I can't take that risk." "Then let's find another solution. Let me make some calls. Maybe we can track where Richard is keeping Emily." While Mr. Johnson made his calls, Michael got a text from an unknown number. "Grandma Grace always said I was clever. Trust me. E." Michael felt a mix of relief and worry. Emily was alive and apparently able to communicate, but it also meant she was planning something that could be dangerous. 40 minutes later, Mr. Johnson returned with news. "I managed to trace the phone Richard used to call. The signal is coming from an abandoned warehouse in Queens. I've already alerted the police discreetly." "Richard told me to go alone," Michael said. "And you will, but not completely alone." The plan was simple. Michael would go to the location as if to sign the papers, but the police would be positioned around the warehouse, ready to act at the right moment. When Michael arrived at the warehouse at 8 that night, he found Richard waiting with 2 large men beside him. There was no sign of Emily. "Where is she?" Michael asked. "First, the papers," Richard replied, holding out a folder. "First, I see Emily," Michael insisted. Richard signaled, and one of the men brought Emily out from a back room. She was tied up, but seemed unharmed. "Uncle Michael," she shouted. "Don't sign anything there." One of the men covered her mouth, silencing her. "She's fine, as promised," Richard said. "Now, sign." Michael took the documents, but hesitated. If he signed, he'd lose everything he'd built. If he didn't, he might lose Emily. "Richard," he said calmly, "do you really think it's worth destroying an innocent child over money?" "I'm not destroying anyone," Richard replied coldly. "I'm just taking back what should have always been mine. The company was never yours. You were just a minority partner." "A minority partner who did all the heavy lifting while you took all the credit," shouted Richard, losing control. "You always thought you were better than me, always treated me like a subordinate." "That's not true, and you know it," said Michael. "You were always treated as an equal." "Lies," roared Richard. "And now you'll pay for years of humiliation. Sign these papers or the girl will meet the same fate as her grandmother." Michael froze. "What do you mean by that?" Richard smirked maliciously. "You think old Grace passed away naturally? She was digging too deep, asking too many questions about certain irregularities. she'd uncovered in your family's financial records. You killed Grace? Whispered Michael, horrified. Let's just say she had a very unfortunate fall. Richard laughed. Emily managed to partially free herself from the gag. Lies! She screamed. My grandmother fell because she was sick. The doctors confirmed it. The doctors saw what I wanted them to see, Richard said cruelly. A sick old woman who tripped on the stairs because she forgot to take her blood pressure medication. Very convenient. The revelation hit Michael like lightning. Richard had murdered Grace to cover up his financial crimes, and now he was threatening to do the same to Emily. You're a monster, Michael said, pure hatred in his voice. I'm a smart businessman, Richard shot back, and you have 30 seconds to sign, or the girl will have an accident very similar to her grandmother's. It was then that Emily did something completely unexpected. She managed to break free from the ropes entirely and shouted, Now! The warehouse doors burst open simultaneously, and armed police officers stormed in from all directions. Police! Nobody move! Richard and his thugs were subdued before they could react. Emily ran into Michael's arms, and he held her tightly. How did you get free? He asked, amazed. Grandma taught me a few tricks when I was little, Emily replied with a mischievous smile, and I managed to message the police when they weren't looking. The detective approached Michael. Mr. Thompson, we recorded his entire confession about the murder of Mrs. Grace Wilson. Richard Cooper is under arrest for murder, kidnapping, attempted homicide, and corporate fraud. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. Michael watched as Richard was led away in handcuffs. Why Grace? He asked. She never hurt anyone. Because she found out I'd been embezzling from your family's personal accounts for years, Richard sneered. The old woman was too clever for her own good. So you killed her to protect your crimes. I did what needed to be done to protect my interests. Emily stepped toward Richard, staring into his eyes with an intensity that surprised everyone. My grandmother always said bad people get what they deserve in the end, she said calmly. She was right. Richard was taken away, and Michael and Emily finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the weeks that followed, their lives began to settle. Investigations revealed Richard had been stealing from the company for years, using complex money laundering schemes. All the stolen fortune was recovered, and Michael regained full control of the company. Most importantly, he had officially adopted Emily, and she was now legally his daughter. How does it feel to be a heroine? Michael asked one morning as Emily got ready for school. I don't feel like a heroine, she replied. I feel at home. You saved my life twice, said Michael. First at the restaurant, then helping me uncover the truth about Richard and about Grace. And you saved my life too, Emily replied. You gave me a real family. Michael thought about how his life had completely changed. 6 months ago, he was a lonely businessman focused only on work. Now he had a daughter, had discovered the truth about Grace's departure, and learned what truly mattered in life. Emily, he said, I have an idea. What? How about we create a scholarship in Grandma Grace's name, to help vulnerable children get access to education? Emily's eyes lit up. Grandma would have loved that, she exclaimed. She always said education was the one thing no one could take from us. Then let's do it, and you'll help me run the program. Really? Emily asked excitedly. Can I pick some of the kids who'll receive the scholarships? Of course. Who better than you to identify children who really need an opportunity? In the following months, the Grace Wilson Foundation became one of the city's most respected initiatives. Emily, now 13, became a passionate advocate for the rights of homeless children. She gave talks at schools, met with social workers, and whenever possible went out with Michael to identify children who could benefit from the program. You have a special gift for this, Michael said one afternoon, after Emily had convinced a 9-year-old girl to accept help and return to school. It's not a gift, Emily replied. It's experience. I know what it's like to have no one who cares about you, and I know how important it is when someone shows up and offers a real chance. Michael's life had found a new purpose. His business was still successful, but now he knew true success lay in the family he'd found and the lives they were helping to change. One day, Emily came home from school with a thoughtful expression. "Michael," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think Grandma Grace knew we'd find each other someday?" Michael thought for a moment. "You know, Emily, I think she did. Grace was always very wise. She must have known that one day I'd need you as much as you'd need me." "Like it was fate." "Like it was family," Michael corrected. "Sometimes the family that matters most isn't the one we're born into, but the one we choose, or that chooses us." Emily smiled. "Then I choose you as my real dad." "And I choose you as my real daughter," Michael replied, hugging her. That evening, as Emily did her homework, Michael looked at a photo of Grace that now decorated the living room. The woman who had raised him and who had raised Emily was smiling in the picture, as if she knew her plan had worked. "Thank you, Grace," he whispered to the photo, "for everything." 2 years later, on the 3rd anniversary of the Grace Wilson Foundation, Michael and Emily were at a celebration when a reporter asked Emily how she felt about all the changes in her life. "I've learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best," Emily answered, with the wisdom of someone far older than her 15 years. "Losing my grandmother was terrible, but it led me to Michael. And nearly being poisoned was terrible for him, but it brought us together." "And what are your plans for the future?" the reporter asked. Emily looked at Michael and smiled. "I'll study law to defend children who have no one to stand up for them, and I'll keep working with my dad to help more families find each other." "Your biological father?" "My real dad," Emily corrected, looking at Michael with affection. "The man who chose me and whom I chose." The ceremony ended with a heartwarming surprise. The mayor announced that a new public school would be built and named after Grace Wilson, in honor of the woman who had inspired the program. "Grandma would have been so proud," Emily whispered to Michael. "She is proud," he replied. "Wherever she is, she's watching all of this and smiling." That night at home, Emily showed Michael a project she was working on for the school. "It's about unconventional families," she explained. "Families formed not by blood, but by choice and love. Like ours. Exactly like ours." Michael read Emily's project and was moved by the maturity and wisdom in the girl's words. She had written about how true family is the one that protects, supports, and loves you unconditionally. "This project is perfect," he said. "You have a bright future ahead." "I do," Emily agreed, "and I'll use that future to help other kids find their real families, just like I found mine." 5 years later, Emily graduated high school with honors and was accepted into the city's top law school. On graduation day, Michael sat in the front row, as proud as any biological father would be. During the farewell speech, Emily was chosen to represent her class. "Some of you know my story," she began, looking at the audience. "How I was a street kid who got a second chance at life. But what many don't know is that I wasn't the only one who got a second chance that fateful night 5 years ago." She looked directly at Michael in the crowd. "My dad got a second chance too. The chance to discover that true success isn't about the money you make, but the lives you touch. The chance to learn that family isn't about blood, but about love and choice." The audience was completely silent, absorbing every word. Today, thanks to the program we created together, 47 children who were living on the streets are attending school regularly. 15 of them have already reunited with their biological families, and 32 have found adoptive families who truly love them. The applause was thunderous. "But more important than the numbers," Emily continued, "is the lesson I learned. It's never too late to start over, never too late to choose to be better, and never too late to find your true family." After the ceremony, as Michael and Emily celebrated at home, she handed him a wrapped gift. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it and see." Inside was a framed photo of the two of them with an inscription, "To the best dad in the world who saved me when I saved you. With eternal love, Emily." Michael felt tears in his eyes. "Emily, You don't have to say anything," she interrupted, hugging him. "I know." Know what? That you love me as much as I love you, and that Grandma Grace is watching over us and smiling, knowing her plan worked. Michael hugged Emily tightly, thinking about the journey that had brought them there. From a poisoning attempt in an upscale restaurant to a happy family and a program transforming lives. Grace really planned it all, didn't she? He said. Of course she did, Emily laughed. She was always the smartest one of us all. That night, before bed, Michael looked again at Grace's photo in the living room. The woman who had raised him had found a way to keep caring for him even after she was gone, through her granddaughter. Thank you for Emily, he whispered to the photo, and thank you for teaching me that real family is the one we choose to love. The next morning, Emily woke up early and found Michael making breakfast. Good morning, Dad, she said, using the word that had become natural between them. Good morning, sweetheart, he replied with a smile. Ready to start college next week? Ready, Emily answered with determination. And ready to keep doing our work of helping other families find each other. Our work will never end, will it? Michael asked. I hope not, Emily replied, because there are still so many children who need a chance, and so many adults who need to learn what really matters in life. Michael looked at Emily and saw not just the brave girl who had saved his life, but a strong, determined young woman ready to change the world. You're right, he said. Our work is just beginning. And so, as the sun rose over New York City, father and daughter by heart planned how they could continue honoring the memory of Grace Wilson and helping other families discover that true love knows no bounds of blood, age, or circumstance. The story that had begun with a desperate cry on a night of near tragedy had transformed into a journey of love, redemption, and purpose. And the best part was knowing this was just the first page of many more stories of hope yet to come. 3 years later, on the day Emily graduated from law school, she opened her own practice specializing in children's and youth rights. Her first client was a 10-year-old girl found living alone on the streets, just as Emily had years before. Hello, Emily said to the girl kneeling to meet her at eye level. What's your name? Sophia, the girl answered shyly. Sophia, I used to live on the streets when I was your age too. And I can promise you one thing. You're not alone. We'll find you a real family just like they did for me. The girl looked at Emily with the same hopeful eyes Emily had once had when she met Michael. How can I be sure? Sophia asked. Emily smiled and pointed to the photo on the office wall, where she and Michael stood arm in arm with all the children they'd helped over the years. Because real family always finds a way, she replied, and ours keeps growing. Michael, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward and held out his hand to Sophia. Hi, Sophia. I'm Michael, Emily's dad, and if she says we'll help you, you can count on it. Sophia looked at Emily, then at Michael, seeing the same kindness and determination in their faces that had changed their own lives. You'll really help me? She asked. We will, Emily said, because that's how our story started, and that's how your new story will begin too. As Emily began explaining Sophia's rights and all the possibilities ahead, Michael thought of Grace and how proud she would be to see her legacy of love and protection still growing, one child at a time. The girl who had once cried, "Uncle, don't drink. They put something in your glass," had become a dedicated lawyer, a beloved daughter, and a tireless advocate for vulnerable children. And the man who had nearly been poisoned that fateful night had discovered that true wealth wasn't in the businesses he owned, but in the family he'd chosen to build and the lives he'd helped transform. 5 years later, Emily married a young lawyer she'd met in college, who shared her passion for social justice. Michael beamed with pride on her wedding day, walking her down the aisle as the devoted father he'd become. Are you ready? He asked, offering his arm. Ready, replied Emily, adjusting her veil. And thank you for everything, Dad. Thank you, he answered, for saving my life and teaching me what really matters. Grandma Grace would be proud of both of us, said Emily, looking up at the sky. I'm sure she is, agreed Michael. When they reached the altar, Emily turned to the congregation and saw dozens of children and teens who had been helped by the Grace Wilson Foundation over the years. They were all there to celebrate the wedding of the woman who had changed their lives. During the ceremony, the priest asked if anyone objected to the marriage. A child's voice shouted from the back of the church, "I object to Aunt Emily stopping helping kids now that she's getting married." Everyone laughed, and Emily turned to respond, "Don't worry, I'll keep helping children for the rest of my life. Now I'll just have more help to do it." Emily's husband, David, waved to the children, "And I promise to help her with everything." The applause was thunderous. 2 years later, Emily and David welcomed their first child, a baby girl named Grace, after the woman who had made it all possible. "Look at you, Grace," said Michael, cradling his granddaughter. "You'll grow up in a family that chose each other, a family that truly loves one another." Little Grace stared at her grandfather with curious eyes, as if understanding the weight of his words. Emily watched the scene with a full heart. "Dad, do you think our Grace will be as special as Grandma Grace?" "I'm sure she will," Michael replied. "She's already surrounded by so much love. There's no way it can go wrong." Just then, David came home with exciting news. "Emily," he called, "it just got approved. The new law you helped draft was signed. Now, homeless children are guaranteed psychological support and educational assistance." Emily jumped up, nearly knocking things over. "Really? We did it?" "We did," David confirmed, hugging her. "Your law will help thousands of children across the state." Michael watched Emily's happiness and felt his chest swell with pride. The girl he'd found on what could have been a tragic night had not only become his daughter, but a true force for change in the world. "Grandma Grace must be celebrating in heaven," Emily said, tears of joy in her eyes. "She absolutely is," Michael agreed. "And she's probably planning a few more miraculous coincidences to keep spreading love in the world." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Michael stayed alone in the living room looking at the family photos covering the walls. Pictures of Emily growing up, graduating, getting married. Photos of the children they'd helped over the years. Snapshots of little Grace in her first months of life. And at the center of it all, the original photo of Grace Wilson, smiling as if she knew her plan had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. "You did good, Grace," Michael whispered to the photo. "Your granddaughter didn't just find a family. She's creating families for hundreds of other children." He thought back to the incredible journey that had started with a desperate cry on a cold night. "Uncle, don't drink. They put something in your glass." That cry had saved his life that night, but more importantly, it had saved his soul. It had turned a lonely businessman obsessed with profits into a loving father and an advocate for vulnerable children. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, "for saving me from an empty life and giving me one full of purpose." In the next room, Emily was putting little Grace to sleep, humming the same lullaby Grandma Grace had sung to her when she was small. "Sleep, my angel, for Mommy is here. Daddy is here, Grandpa is here, and you'll never be alone again." Little Grace closed her eyes with a smile on her face, as if she understood she had been born into a family built with love and dedication. And so, in a home full of love in New York City, 3 generations rested, knowing they had found exactly where they belonged, in a family that had chosen itself and would continue choosing each other every day, forever. The story that had begun with an attempted poisoning on a dark night had transformed into a saga of love, redemption, and hope, one that would continue touching lives for generations to come. And somewhere Grace Wilson smiled, knowing her legacy of love and protection was safe in the hands of the family she had helped raise, a family that would keep spreading that love to every child in need of a second chance in life. Because sometimes when we shout "don't drink" to save someone, we end up saving far more than a single life. We end up saving a soul, creating a family, and changing the world, one child at a time. The end. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have anything to share with us, leave your heartfelt thoughts in the comments. Do you think Emily made the right choices throughout her life? We'd love to hear your thoughts about this family formed through love and choice. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other touching stories.